Greeting from ADBI. Thank you for your waiting and thank you for your joining our webinar, which I'm delighted to say you present APEC Secretariat Executive Director, Rebecca Sta Maria. Rebecca, it is a pleasure to welcome you here in our office in Tokyo and have you join our flagship webinar series. My name is Kaori Hitomi, and I'm the facilitator of this event. I'd like to invite ADBI Deputy Dean to welcome the Executive Director and outline the webinar flows. Sonja Beck is a Deputy Dean of ADBI. Prior to joining ADBI, he served as Deputy Minister of Planning and Coordination at the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Republic Korea. He has 30 years of economic development policy experience. His other previous roles include serving as a senior policy analyst focused on developing countries for the OECD, as well as an international development expert at the World Bank Institute. DD Beck, floor is yours.
Thank you, Kaori-san. I am delighted to welcome APEC Secretariat Executive Director Rebecca Sta Maria in our office in Tokyo to join our featured speakers webinar series during your busy week in Tokyo. It's our greatest pleasure to host this event that will convey your insight as the head of APEC that gathers 21 members economies in the Pacific Rim promoting free trade. Ms. Rebecca will provide a keynote speech following an opening remark by ADBI Dean. During a following question and answer session, Rebecca will address questions from the audience. The webinar will conclude with a summary provided by John Barney, ADBI's Vice Chair of Research and Senior Research Fellow. I would now like to invite our Dean Tetsushi Sonobe to deliver his opening. He's the Dean and CEO of the ADBI, the Tokyo-based think tank of the Asian Development Bank. Before joining ADBI in April 2020, he served for 6 years as a vice president of the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, in Tokyo, and taught economics for 30 years at Tokyo Metropolitan University and the GRIPS. Dean Sonobe is a recipient of the Nikkei Book Publication Prize and Masayoshi Ohira Memorial Prize, and also a founding board member of the Japanese Association for Development Economics. He holds a PhD from Yale University. Please welcome Dean Sonobe.
So, Rebecca, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for the kind introduction. It's my great pleasure and great honor to welcome Executive Director of APEC Secretariat, Dr. Rebecca Sta Maria, to join our webinar amid her very tight schedule in Tokyo. We are excited to hear timely insights from her on how to rebuild supply chains affected by the COVID-19 crisis amid pandemic repercussions and rising global instability. She will detail APEC member economies policy priorities during Thailand's host year that will culminate with the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting on 18 to 19 November in Bangkok. Rebecca will also explain the outlook of 2023 APEC, which will be hosted by the United States. Before we move on to her keynote, please allow me to take a moment to give our audience her achievements prior to her current position. Before joining APEC, Rebecca served as Secretary General of Malaysia's Ministry of International Trade and Industry from 2010 to 2016. In this role, she oversaw the formulation of Malaysia's trade policy and was chief negotiator for bilateral and regional free trade agreements, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. In the Association of Southeast Asia Nations, ASEAN, she chaired the body that drafted ASEAN's economic community blueprints for 2015 and 2025. Rebecca, thank you again for your joining us. Floor is yours.
Let me just unmute myself. Yes, so this is something that we've all gotten used to. I hope I can be heard. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Dean and Deputy Dean. Happy to be here with ADBI. As many of you in the audience know, APEC is a very specific organization focusing on economic cooperation. It is different in that it is voluntary and non-binding, and it operates on consensus. So the very fact that it's non-binding makes it possible for such a diverse group of economies to cooperate and engage in pragmatic and mutually beneficial policy discussions. It always, strikes me that if you're in a very binding environment, such as ASEAN or the WTO, there is that tendency to posture and to be very cautious. Whereas because we are non-binding, we can expect that folks are more open and have very candid discussions. And I think that's what the value that international organizations like APEC bring to the international trade environment. The diversity that we see in APEC is to some extent, challenged in today's environment. But it also means that our continued existence and adherence to the process allows for all of us to meet in good faith. And that's what we've been doing especially this year when it's been extra challenging. As I said, we're not a rules-based forum, but because we're the important thing that really drives us is trust. That's our common currency, trust. Specifically, trust in the fact that each of us represent our business community or academia or all those issues that are brought to the table. And we're all invested in the greater good brought about by cooperation in spite of our differences. And trust has seen us over the course of the years addressing many challenging events. 2 major financial crises, disruptions because of trade tensions, the China-US trade tensions, and of course, COVID-19, plus the war in Ukraine. These are realities that we deal with. And because of that trust element, I think we are able to manage some of the more challenging issues in a more comfortable, more non-threatening manner. And that's the value that we bring. Let me also just say, before I go into the details of what we're doing on supply chain, just talk of the role of government, because I feel very strongly that when we talk of supply chains, it is not just about business and corporations, but also there's a role of government. There's enough documentary evidence on how the pandemic has impacted each of us, each of our economies. The APEC region's economic growth is expected to slow to 2.5% this year, following a 5.9% expansion in 2021, and will improve slightly in 2023 to 2.6%. This is according to new data that was just published by the APEC Policy Support Unit. The role of government in the whole idea of facilitating or dealing with supply chains is really about trade and business facilitation, creating the conducive environment for trade and investment to grow. This means working more intensely on the infrastructure, whether it's the physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, and really what became very evident during the early days of the pandemic was that it was important for us to keep our supply chains open, keeping trade data flowing, dealing with at the border and behind the border measures. And this will continue throughout our work. Our initiatives at the regional level also feeds into the WTO. At APEC, we've always asserted that the importance of the rules-based multilateral trading system with WTO at its core. Our goal is to safeguard a free, fair, open, non-discriminatory, transparent, inclusive, predictable trade and investment environment. We continue to support necessary reforms in the WTO to improve effectiveness of its monitoring, negotiating, and dispute settlement functions. The developments in the region, the progress of the CPTPP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, all ultimately contribute to trade and investment policy at the multilateral level. So take RCEP, for example. It is the first FTA involving China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. This means that the tariff liberalization schedules agreed during this time, will not only improve market access for goods exported from these countries, but also raise the opportunity for ASEAN member states to further participate in global value chains, global supply chains. For me, RCEP also is a rising tide model for economic integration, because we're bringing in parties that are developed as well as not quite LDCs, but emerging and with a lot of potential. So the fact that we have been able to bring the parties together says a lot for the region. So, but again, coming back to the role of government, I talked about infrastructure, whether it's physical or digital, to facilitate the flow of goods in the whole scheme of discussions or the whole conversation around value chains. It is also imperative to ensure that government works with business to deal with existing non-tariff measures, so that whatever regulatory environment that we have is transparent and there is coherence within the region through harmonization. And that's what we try and do in the trade agreements that we have, and also in the work, specifically in the work that we do in APEC, whether it's through the Committee on Trade and Investment, whether it's at the Economic Committee, or in terms of the work that we do in capacity building. Ecotech is one of the strong pillars within APEC. Now let me go to the role of APEC in this conversation. At the onset of the pandemic, many APEC officials expressed concern that protectionism and vaccine nationalism will prevail. But the 21 member economies came together, meeting virtually, to pledge, among other things, to support for facilitating the movement of vaccines across borders and ensure low tariffs for essential medical goods. We were quick to act to ensure that we kept the flow of essential goods flowing. We held a special leaders meeting in July 2021 to reinforce the importance of such collaboration. We worked closely with business community, and we were committed to working together to facilitate the flow of goods and services, especially those that support our health and economic response at a critical time. So let me just give you 3 examples. At the height of the pandemic, APEC members ramped up trade facilitation efforts to move COVID-19 vaccines and essential goods across borders, including preventing the movement of counterfeit vaccines and related goods in cooperation with relevant international organizations. We refrained from imposing unnecessary export restrictions. You remember in the early days, that was one of the knee-jerk reactions, was to look at export restrictions. But we really worked together to ensure that we did not do so. And some economies, in fact, continued liberalizing. One of the things that the APEC Policy Support Unit came up with quickly was to provide a broad picture of where the tariffs were for essential goods, medical devices. And member economies, when they saw it there, they realized that some of them had high tariffs on things that were required during this pandemic, and unilaterally brought it down or kept it at zero for this. And that, I think, was a very important part of the work that we did to ensure that there was this flow of goods and of essential goods. our customs, I must say, also stepped up. They came up with the best practice guidelines for APEC customs administrations. They put that in place. The guidelines comprise a set of operational and practical measures to ensure that the region's supply chains are equipped to facilitate the flow of COVID-19 vaccines and related goods. You know, that's one of the more important things that came through from the pandemic, the fact that our customs bodies came together very quickly to in step with what the leaders wanted done. So much of APEC's focus has been on managing the impact of the pandemic and working collaboratively towards recovery. And I think this has set the stage for further, improvements on the part of government and institutions like APEC. So sharing of information on policy initiatives and measures, keeping markets open, facilitating the flow of essential goods and services, facilitating the movement of people. And that was one thing that we also did in collaboration with the business community, was working very closely with international organizations to see how we could ensure the movement of essential workers at that point in time. And that work is continuing because we don't see this as just something that's going to end today. We may encounter similar challenges, and this is where the learnings through COVID during the time of COVID will really come in very useful. So we must not forget the lessons that we've learned. Harnessing the opportunities of the digital economy, and I know all of us are very familiar with the fact that during the time of the 2020, 2021, we all had to come up to speed on our own at a very personal level, the use of the digital tools that we had and how fast we had to learn. So that would continue, I think, and those are important lessons. Coordinating with counterparts in the international community, that was the other really important takeaway. We saw that it wasn't just about health or economics. It was bringing all the different parties in government together, the finance folks, the health, the international bodies, so that we have a concerted effort towards dealing with this. And I think that, and academia, of course, and that will continue. We've started the momentum, and it will continue. So for us in APEC, very important to go back to basics, build on the lessons of the pandemic. We clearly, what we've learned is that we need more predictability of our rules. We also need to be the flexibility to facilitate goods and services that would be required at that point in time. We need enhanced global and regional cooperation. We need more innovation, and here innovation not just in the sense of developing new products and services, but flexibility and adaptability and change. So relooking our policies, our guidelines, we've started this, let's not stop, let's continue. Regulatory innovation, distilling best practice, sharing them more widely. As I mentioned, cross-fora collaboration. This is something we really learned. We cannot work in silos. We need to have our trade folks, our health folks, the business, customs, civil society, because at the end of the day, it's about the well-being of our people. It's about ensuring business continues to grow and to thrive. Work on supply chains very quickly. What our raison d'etre in APEC is, and we say this very often, make it faster, cheaper, easier to do business in APEC region, right? And that essentially is also the continuation, and it takes us through to our vision, the APEC Putrajaya Vision 2040 of an open, dynamic, resilient, peaceful region, so that becomes a reality. And the fact that I think it was prescient for us when we were drawing up the vision to include the phrase or the word peaceful in the work that we were doing, because that was what we did in 2020. Today we realize how important peace is, the importance of a resilient and peaceful region, what it means for the well-being of all our people. So at the end of the day, APEC provides a platform to strengthen collaboration on supply chain challenges, including making sure that our supply chains embody strong environmental and labor standards, working to identify bottlenecks and choke points in the supply chains of the different sectors, such as health. Here I'm referring specifically to health and biopharmaceuticals, as well as electronics, because this has become very apparent. Also, ensuring the integrity of supply chains is integral to our work. So, for example, APEC member economies, non-APEC member economies alike can be adversely affected by international movement of substandard and falsified medical products. again, I must say that the work that we've done in APEC is not just because of the pandemic, but we started work on this years ago. In 2013, for example, our experts began work on a roadmap for supply chain security. This culminated in a toolkit. Like, we are not a binding organization. We don't have agreements per se, but we have guidelines, we have toolkits, and this particular toolkit covers the entire supply chain and life cycle for medical products. And it embodies also a training element, because that's also important. So understanding processes, procedures, tools, and the training to facilitate this appreciation of the importance of security in supply chains. Another area of work is, like I mentioned earlier, an understanding of and compliance with international standards and ethics. Again, here is the work of the Business Ethics for APEC SMEs initiative. It is, in fact, the world's largest public partnership to strengthen ethical business practices in, for now, 2 sectors very important for SMEs, and this is the medical and biopharmaceutical sectors. And there is much more work being done here to enable SMEs to be part of GVCs in this sector, to deepen their stakeholder collaboration, strengthen their sense of ethical business conduct, and build the networks. Again, I have to emphasize, we're not binding. So we just build these networks of trust to promote accountability of ensuring business ethics, ensuring standards, international standards are complied with, ensuring transparency. These are built into the work of the APEC, what we call the Business in Ethics for APEC SMEs initiative. There are now also emerging challenges. I mean, and you can well appreciate it. We remain vulnerable to supply shortages, inflation, soaring worldwide inflation, protracted war in Ukraine. These are all heightened uncertainties. Of course, we can't forget climate change, which continues its acceleration of extreme weather disasters affecting our region. Even as we speak, we know that there are a couple of huge incidences in Canada, in Manila, in the Philippines, making its way to Vietnam. We're all exposed to that. And I must say, we have the governments within APEC, we are very conscious of it, and we're working to support each other. We have the Emergency Preparedness Working Group, for example, doing work on this as well. Digital transformation is the next big thing when it comes to supply chains. And in that context, we are very conscious of the digital divide. There's 2 sides to this. You can have progress in your supply chains and trade flows, but you also can deepen the digital divide. So a lot of work needs to be done. The digital divide not only between economies, but within economies themselves, the rural, the urban. So increasing access to technologies, digital literacy, ensuring you have the digital infrastructure, those will be high on our agenda as well. I want to draw attention to the APEC cross-border privacy rules, because when you have flows of information and data, privacy rules become even more important. And the Cdpr is one of the initiatives that we have had in place for a very long time in APEC. And APEC, as they say, is the incubator of ideas and incubator of initiatives. This is one, and it's now taken shape. And it is in April, the like-minded economies have gone on to establish what is called the Global Cdpr Forum. A number of economies have already signed on to this, and very important for us to know that the private sector is running with this. So the APEC Business Advisory Council is taking this further and having a conversation later in October to explore business implications, applications, and opportunities of digital trust linked again with data privacy. So much more work is being done. And I think, let me to also highlight, apart from talking of value chains, to ensure the inclusiveness of the work that we do as well. So the importance of women's full and equal participation and representation in all our economies. That's going to take priority for us. The work that we do on ensuring we have data on this matter. So the APEC Women and the Economy Dashboard helps us in that policy direction, data gathering and policy direction. Environment, work on environment will take more and more of our time and our resources, because you know, it has started with the Putrajaya vision, where we have a pillar specifically for sustainability and inclusive growth. And Thailand this year, as host of APEC, has adopted the Biocircular Green, or the BCG economy model, as its flagship for 2020, to get us thinking, even as we talk of value chains and value supply chains, global supply chains, to ensure that the green element is embedded in our supply chain. So working on sustainability goals, how do we get to net zero? How do we get to a sustainable trade and investment? How do we ensure that there is the balance between economic growth and conservation of our environment, biodiversity? These are conversations which are, to some extent, not easy to have, but important to have. And Thailand this year is leading us in that. One very proud results of all the work that we've done, you know, while we're non-binding, we do discuss and try best endeavor initiatives. So one best endeavor initiative was to increase forest cover. You know, we set ourselves the goal of improving or increasing forest cover to 20 million hectares by 2020. But what we've managed to do was, we've increased it. The last count, when the ministers met, they provided these details, 22.7 million hectares between 2008 and 2020. So we are ahead of our targets in that sense. We've also looking at environmental goods. So there's much work being done. Our finance ministers will be meeting 3rd week of October, and they will be looking at green financing, sustainable financing. That's another area. So a lot of work being done on various levels to ensure that it's a holistic approach to supply chains. It is not just looking at just one-way flow, but really holistic, because the whole issue of supply chains is more complicated because of the way we do business today, right? So a lot is ahead of us, and next year, when the US chairs or takes over as host of APEC, we will see the work that will be, or the priorities expressed by the US will really dovetail with what's being done over the course of this few years. It's been a while since the US hosted. The last time was 2011, and I must say that when US hosted, there were key priorities that we still have as our own priorities today, which is really, and we've built on those priorities. US was a leading contributor, I must say, to women's economic empowerment, as well as the sustainability policy track. So if you track the history of APEC, these two areas were given special priority during the 2011 hosting of APEC by the US, and you've seen how it has gained traction and grown over the years. So we expect that to hear more of this when the US hosts next year. These tracks, you know, are relevant today. They will be even more relevant going forward. So we can expect to hear a lot more on these two areas. So at the end of the day, you know, we in APEC, we look at what's going on in the environment, and we know that we contribute to those initiatives just as much as APEC is benefiting from the initiatives that are taking place in the region. For example, as I alluded to earlier, the progress that we've made on CPTPP, the progress that we've made on RCEP, the Pacific Alliance work that's ongoing. These are all, in the end, enriching the work that we do in APEC. We have, as has often been said, our final goal of a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. Well, you know, we may not have it in a solid agreement sort of format, but clearly the work that's going on in the region at the end of the day feeds into our ambition for better, for deeper regional economic integration, whether it takes the form of FTAP or something similar, is left to be seen. But definitely, as far as our constituents are concerned, the private sector and the policymakers are concerned, that's our ultimate goal, FTAP. So making sure that we pull together all the initiatives in the region to get us to this particular goal. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca, for a very comprehensive remark, which mapped out the current situation, challenges, opportunities, especially the role of APEC, especially your comment coming just 2 months before the big meeting in November. So, which is already drawing lots of questions, but allow me to take a short moment to hear your thoughts about think tank's role. Actually, we are celebrating 25th anniversary this year. And we are really wishing to hear your thoughts, how we can advance our research and also capacity building path to benefit for the region, especially coming from your perspective as an APEC chief and also the former regional senior policymaker.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me, first of all. So congratulations on your 25th anniversary, 25 years of service to the region. I mean, that's something to be proud of. I strongly believe in the contribution of think tanks and academia in working together, you know, to for the betterment of the region, because policymakers cannot make policy in a vacuum, you know, and as a policymaker myself, I used to depend on think tanks, on researchers to provide us that really frank opinions, because sometimes policymakers, we don't want to hear certain things, but and you know, those sometimes the business community also won't tell you some of the things, you know, but you can trust that the think tanks, especially independent think tanks, to give you solid feedback and then provide you with the evidence that you need. Because as I said, you can decide to get together policymakers and make some policy decision, but it may not have the kind of consequences that you want. Whereas if you have evidence-based support, then your policy making is more concrete, right? More meaningful. And that's the role, I think, of organizations like ADBI, working together with APEC Policy Support Unit. So there is a lot of areas for collaboration, you know, for us to strengthen the research that we're doing to support policymakers. Very important for me. I you know, as being a policymaker for many years, I really look to institutions like ADBI, like APEC Policy Support Unit, and other think tanks, and you know, to provide us the necessary data, evidence that we need to ensure that our policies make sense and contribute to business.
Our audience includes lots of researchers, and obviously including ourselves, but also many academics as well as policymakers. So I think you shed so much light, and I'm sure that we will try to advance towards that. And then now I'd like to turn the floor to the questions coming from the floor. And because of the challenges that you mentioned and opportunities are probably unique depending on the region where you are located at. So I see questions on these issues. So once, let me start from question coming from Mohara, Star Media Group. So Mohara asks, so which countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia have made advancement in green supply chains? What are examples of success stories? Do you have any ideas?
I think the work on greening our supply chains is ongoing. It is, for me, it's still early days. I know that there's much that's being done. There's the push from up, you know, there's a top down push for us to be more green in our in all our approaches. And there's also the bottom up, because society, the young especially, are demanding that, requiring us to be more concerned about our impact on the environment. So this is really a concern across the region. It's not specific to any one economy. Some are more ahead than the others, but the value of APEC in all this is the ability for us to bring parties together to share best practice. Like I said, this is an evolving area, and some economies are doing better than others in certain areas. So the ability to share those best practices, to share case studies, and that's our strength, that really helps.
Thank you, Rebecca. Actually, that's slightly, once again, region-based, but specifically another very important region would be South Asia. And so especially, so you mentioned small emerging economies in South Asia. So what role they can play in global value chains? And so what are your views about inter-regional cooperation, largely between South and Southeast Asia through grid, rail, and land connectivity to ensure supply chain stability?
Yeah.
Once again, clean energy security and food and nutrition security, which is becoming extremely important. And then this one came from our another researcher, Dio Rafford.
Okay. Let me just take a few steps back. I mentioned Southeast Asia, the deepening economic integration in Southeast Asia through RCEP. I mean, that's one big area of work that's happening, and that's real. And when we talk of how do we ensure that they become participants, that the smaller economies or SMEs, regardless of where the SMEs are, how do you ensure that they benefit from all the work that's being done in terms of market access, in terms of regulatory coherence, in terms of trade facilitation? That's I think the role of government, really. How do you ensure? It's fine, all well and good for governments to sign agreements, right? But what's next? How do you ensure that the folks that you claim to be doing this for, how do you ensure that these folks can take full advantage of these agreements, the market access that you've provided, that they are the smaller, the SMEs or MSMEs can tap into these value chains, supply chains that you have so-called facilitated. So there is that role of government. One, to ensure that you facilitate the vendor development, for example. I know that some economies have done very well in vendor development, so that you ensure that SMEs can tap into the supply and value chains of these bigger companies. That's one way. The other, and this is what I'm really, really passionate about, having trade agreements, facilitating and talking about regional economic integration is all well and good, but where the rubber meets the road is, what are you doing within your own economies to ensure that goods can flow? So basic things like ensuring you have physical infrastructure that's working, that works for the people. You talk of choke points in a chain, but there are also choke points and roadblocks, physical ones that you can see. So you need to address that. You need to ensure that the folks who are in the rural part of your economy are able to move their products to the ports, for example, or to the companies or the factories, the smaller vendors to fit into the factories. Now, if the fellow is working in some rural part of the economy, but cannot, and making an important component, but cannot get that component to the bigger factories, what are we talking about? I mean, that's so basic. And even as I say it's basic, it is real. We need to address that. Otherwise, all the trade agreements that you put in place, all the market access that you facilitate will come to naught, and you won't see any change in your economic situation because you haven't addressed the basics. So we are famous for saying, and when I say we, I mean policymakers are famous for saying, oh, get onto the digital, economy, start selling online, go and do e-commerce, yeah, but if I don't have broadband access, what are we talking about? So that is things that the government has to pay particular attention to. And international organizations like APEC, all we can do is share best practice and provide you case studies. But at the end of the day, this must be done at the domestic level, at the national level, to invest appropriately in infrastructure, whether it's physical or digital, to invest in education, to prepare your people with the right skills so that they can then take advantage of all the facilities that you have put in place, all the agreements that you have in place, to prepare your people with the SMEs, especially with the necessary standards, so that they understand if you're going to export, you need, or you want to tap into global supply chains, global value chains, you need to make sure that you have standards that you must comply with. Increasingly business ethics that you must comply with, so the issue of labor rights, human rights, all these things have to be put in place, and that's a clear role of government in this regard. So it's not just about businesses doing it on their own, but really the support from governments and international organizations, again, like APEC, provide that opportunity for sharing of how it can be done, of best practice. Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear your reassuring word, especially in this current challenge. Another challenge addressed in the chat box in the form of questions would be another challenge that we are facing is obviously natural disasters, tsunami, volcano, all the things, especially because of the the location APEC economies are located. So we'd like to hear any examples that APEC might be doing to prevent all these natural disasters, or if you have any prospects to do so. That comes from our expert who is specialized in infrastructure, Cisanam.
Yeah. Well, we do not have an emergency preparedness team that would go down to help, with emergencies. What we do have is an emergency preparedness working group, and that group comprises experts from the region, and that's where they provide advice to governments on how best to respond, how to quickly collaborate. But that's an ongoing work that's there. But what's important to note is we do have platforms for the relevant experts to engage and to help each other in dealing with issues of natural disasters. Let me quickly point to one point. Tokyo, for example, Tokyo as a city has gone to the ground to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur, to assist Kuala Lumpur with its flood mitigation, because I come from Kuala Lumpur, and floods were rare when I was growing up in KL. Even till 5, 6 years ago, you don't really hear of floods. You get flash floods, but they're gone in an hour. But the last year has been really bad. We've had really bad cases of flooding. And while it's not under the ambit of APEC or regional cooperation, but the fact is this information that is being shared has facilitated a discussion between Tokyo City and Kuala Lumpur. And Tokyo to the experts have gone down to see how Kuala Lumpur can better deal with the flooding situation that's seem to be paralyzing us. So it's very interesting to see how it may not be directing that we said, oh, we're going to go and help you, but because of these kind of conversations that we're having and the awareness that we have, it's coming from bottom up to help each other, and not being directed from the top. So that's for me very, very reassuring, and gives you the impression of gives you an example of how important this collaboration and this open communication is among economies, among international organizations, among experts, right? Yeah.
Once again, that's the values of a forum like APEC, ASEAN, and all these forums. So I have more coming. Actually, please let me address this. This came from Jenny Gordon, and then from Australia, and also she's part of our AC Advisory Council. So she is asking, what advice has APEC in providing in relation to building resilience of supply chains to geostrategical actions and other sources of disruptions? Obviously, is a very, very topical.
Yeah, yeah. As I shared some information earlier, the work that we've done in the different working groups, in coming up with initiatives, guidelines, best practice, toolkits to ensure, that our SMEs, our businesses have access to some of the best practice in those areas of managing your supply chains. And I drew attention to the one on the security of supply chains. Yes, there's work that's also being done through our Trade and Investment Committee, having those discussions on ensuring resilient supply chains. But at the end of the day, it is up to the businesses to also, find that equilibrium, that level of how they want to build the resilience. Do you want to have concentration risk? And COVID has showed us that, maybe you don't want to limit your suppliers. Maybe you want to spread it out, not have that concentration risk. There are other formulations out there on reshoring, onshoring. Now friendshoring is a new term that I just learned. But I think at the end of the day, it is incumbent upon organizations like ABDI, of our APEC Policy Support Unit, to really come up with the data to show us that whether or not this new ideas that the businesses are attempting, in building resilience to their supply chains, whether it's onshoring, reshore, whatever it is, makes economic sense. I think at the end of the day, we just are policymakers trying to provide the best. But it is really at the end of the day up to organizations like ADBI, APEC Policy Support Unit, to provide us the evidence to say, yeah, reshoring, yes, all well and good, but here's the downside, here's the upside. That would really help us as we try to build resilience in our supply chains.
Actually, that leads me to the next question coming from Dina Azgalieva, who is our sustainability expert. And so she's asking whether the challenges can be an opportunity. So she asked, recent energy prices increase challenges to energy security in many countries. But wouldn't that cause opportunities for people moving to transitioning to green energy? What do you think in reality?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm not an energy expert. I have to say that first, right up front. But today, in this afternoon, there will be a launch of a energy outlook by the APEC Energy Research Center. So that I went through the report and found it extremely instructive. Providing again data on where we are in terms of our energy mix across economies. I found that really very useful, and fully appreciating the fact that some economies can make that transition faster than others. It is not going to happen overnight. The transition to green energy or renewables comes with a cost. It comes with investment, and so there will be a need for greater collaboration and cooperation among economies to see us getting there. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but just having read some of the literature, I can and associate it with some of the work that's being done through the APEC Energy Working Group. You can appreciate the fact that it is going to be it will take time. and I know time is of the essence, but really this is where we will need to rely on our experts to advise us. So hopefully this afternoon, when I go for the launch of the report, I will be better educated on this. But I know that some economies are stepping up faster than others. And I know that also I must again draw attention to the fact that Japan is helping. Again, reference to Malaysia, because I'm familiar with the work being done there on clean coal, because we have our energy mix still very fossil fuel based, and coal also is a key part of that energy mix. So working together with the Japanese experts on managing to manage the emission levels as we generate energy.
Rebecca, actually, I have related question coming in, but unfortunately, because of the time, I think I need to now move on to the closing session, which will be given by our research chair, John Van. I'm trying to spotlight him, which I cannot do. Sorry, John. So John's joining here in the office to give you sort of trying to summarize your presentation and talking points during the question and answer session. So John here, John is, his former title is Vice Chair of Research and Senior Research Fellow at ADBI. John co-chairs ADBI's research department, leading research work streams on macroeconomics, finance, and infrastructure. Previously, he worked as a European Central Bank, focused on international policy analysis and economic research on global financial markets, capital flows, and commodities. He also worked at KPMG and DTZ in Ireland and the United Kingdom. Please welcome John.
Thank you very much, Kari, and thank you very much, Dr. Santa Maria, for your excellent comments and your excellent insights on this important policy issue. I think that towards the end, we touched on the crux of the problem here, which is reducing concentration risk. So this relates not only to sectors, but also the position that economies and firms have within supply chains, and basically what government's role is in addressing these challenges and bottlenecks in transportation and other exposures to key sectors, which can create problems for economies when external shocks arrive, such as what we've seen recently. I think that you outlined very comprehensively the role that APEC and Asian governments can play in dealing with these issues, notably through coordination and laying the foundation for a multilateral approach to enhancing facilitation in trade and investment. But I think that longer term, there's important policy questions that need to be tackled, notably in really harnessing the benefits from digitalization, as you touched upon correctly, and really, utilizing digitalization as a mechanism to improve resilience in the supply chain. And there are other issues, of course, around the feasibility of nearshoring, which you touched upon at the end of your remarks. Of course, there would be benefits to that in terms of bringing more control within the supply chain, but there are obviously, some drawbacks to that as well in terms of, for example, losses in competitive advantage. But overall, I think, this was a very important presentation that you made on one of the main policy issues that we face today, not only in Asia, but globally. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much to all of the questions that were posed by people in the audience, and for your answers, which were excellent as well. So thank you very much on behalf of ADBI.
Yes, thank you very much. Also from me. So thank you very much for the very clear presentation with comprehensive coverage and great insights and very nice questions to all the nice answers to all the questions. And also I appreciate for celebrating the ADBI's 25th anniversary, and also your appreciation of the, the roles of the think tanks and academics in keeping the world better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.